didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for someone else to move first. He just dropped his bag, that old, worn-out bag that held everything he owned in this world, and he walked straight toward the fire. Behind him, the people, stood frozen, and phones up, recording every second of a young woman trapped under a burning truck. One of them moved. But he moved, the man they called crazy, the man they laughed at every single morning at that gas station. He walked into the fire, and nobody could explain why. If this story moves something in you, hit subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments below. Let me see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The summer that changed Red Valley, Arizona, forever started the way most things do in a town like that: slow, hot, without warning, insect kind of July morning, where the air sits heavy on your shoulders before you even open your eyes. The kind where everything smells like dry asphalt and motor oil, and the sky looks almost white from the heat before 9 o'clock. Most folks in Red Valley woke up thinking about the festival, the annual motorcycle gathering that brought thousands of riders pouring into their little stretch of highway every single year. The biggest thing that happened in Red Valley. The only big thing, really. And people had been counting down to it for months. Not Marcus. Hale woke up the same way he always did, on a folded piece of cardboard behind the gas station on Route 9, with the sound of 18-wheelers shaking the ground beneath him and the smell of exhaust already filling his lungs. He didn't have a countdown. He didn't have a calendar. He had a backpack, a coffee tin he used to collect change, a pair of hands that had engines capable of doing 160 miles an hour, hands that now spent most of their time stuffed in his jacket pockets so people wouldn't stare. He was 53 years old and looked 70. That's what hard living does, grief does, when you let it sit long enough without anywhere to put it. The man at the gas station had nicknames for him: the Ghost, Highway Harry. One of the younger guys, a kid named Denny who worked the morning shift, just called him that guy. As in, hey, you want me to run off that guy again? And most mornings, the manager, Phil Burrows, look out the window, shrug, and say, nah, just leave him. He ain't hurting anybody. That was the kindest thing most people in Red Valley said about Marcus. Ain't hurting anybody. Not that he's smart. Not that he's decent. Not that he deserves better. Just he ain't hurting anybody. Marcus had learned to live inside that kind of quiet invisibility. He learned to make himself small enough that people's eyes just slid right past him, the way your eye skips over a crack in the sidewalk. You know it's there, everyone. You've seen it 100 times, but you don't really look at it. He learned to say thank you when someone tossed him $1, and yes, sir, when someone told him to move along. He'd learned to keep his mouth shut about the fact that he used to know more about engines than anyone in this county, because nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants the homeless man to have a past that makes him more than what they've already decided he is. So Marcus kept quiet. He drank his gas station coffee when he could afford it, which wasn't every day, and he watched the world move around him like water moving around a rock, unmoved, unremarkable, until the morning it all changed. Mini climax 1. It started with a sound, not the crash that came later. Before the crash, there was a sound Marcus noticed that nobody else did, because nobody else was paying attention the way Marcus always paid attention to machines. It was a brake squeal, high-pitched, inconsistent, and that stops and starts in a way that tells you the pads aren't making full contact, that something in the caliper is sticking, or the rotor is warped, or the line has a soft spot that's giving way under pressure. It's heard it the way a doctor hears a cough and already knows something is wrong before they ask a single question. Was sitting on the curb outside the gas station, watching the stream of motorcycles rolling past toward the festival grounds, ends about a mile up the highway. Hundreds of them, every style, every color, every brand. And the sound of engines filled the air like thunder that never quite arrived, and the whole town was alive with it in a way it almost never was. And in the middle of all of that, he heard that brake squeal. His eyes found her immediately. She was on a matte black Harley Davidson, soft tail clean lines, custom work, a kind of build that takes serious money and serious knowledge. The way someone rides who knows what they're doing, controlled, measured, leaning into turns with her whole body. She wore a leather jacket with a patch on the back that Marcus didn't recognize yet. Helmet, gloves, all the right gear. But the bike was wrong. Every time she slowed down, every time she squeezed that front brake, just could hear it, that inconsistency, that hitch in the sound. She was compensating for it. He could tell by the way her shoulder shifted slightly every time. The way she was putting a fraction more pressure on the rear to compensate. He knew something was off. She just didn't know how off. Stood up from the curb. He didn't know why he stood up. He had no reason to get involved. He had no standing to walk up to a woman on a motorcycle and tell her she had a brake problem. The man nobody saw, the man nobody listened to, stood up and he opened his mouth. Hey, miss. She didn't hear him. She didn't hear much. The noise was too much. Engines everywhere, music from the festival grounds already drifting down the highway, people talking and laughing and taking pictures. Stepped forward just one step and then stopped. Right at that moment, she pulled into a lane of traffic near the highway entrance, and Marcus lost sight of her behind a line of trucks and SUVs. He stood there for a second. Then he sat back down, tried to tell himself it wasn't his problem. Words about still. He lasted about 4 minutes. 4 minutes of staring at the space where has she disappeared. 4 minutes of that brake sound still playing in his head. Minutes of his hands. Doing that thing they'd always done when he knew something mechanical was wrong. Flexing open and closed, open and closed. The way a surgeon's hands might move when someone on the table, money needs help. He picked up his backpack. He walked toward the highway. Not even walking fast, just moving. You move when some part of you has already made a decision and your brain is just catching up to it. Gas station clerk. Denny watched him go through the window. Is the old ghost going? He asked. Nobody in particular. He answered. Nobody cared. Mini climax too. Just reached the highway entrance and looked out over the crowd. It was massive. Thousands of motorcycles, thousands of people, the festival grounds spilling out from a flat open field that butted right up against the main road. Music, flags, flags. The Iron Wolves, that's what he could see now as he got closer, reading the patches on a cluster of bikes. Near the entrance, one of the biggest and most feared motorcycle clubs in the Southwest. About the name. Everybody in Arizona had heard the name. Didn't hear Iron Wolves without also hearing words like don't mess with and serious people. And I'm not getting involved in that. Just wasn't thinking about the club. Marcus wasn't thinking of the club. He was thinking about the brake line. He scanned the crowd for the matte black softail, turning slowly, blocking the sun with one hand. The noise was enormous. Everyone around him was in their own world, talking, pointing cameras, trading stories about the road they'd ridden to get here. Everyone looked at Marcus. No one ever did. He almost missed her. She was off the bike now. Everyone standing near the entrance gate to two men with Iron Wolves, patches, big men, the kind, who carry themselves like they've never once walked around anyone in their life. She was laughing about something. She seemed fine. The bike was parked at the edge of the road. Marcus walked toward it. He moved slowly, hands loose at his sides, everyone not trying to touch anything. Just looking. He crouched down beside the front wheel and looked at the brake caliper. He tilted his head. He looked at the line where it ran up toward the handlebar. Stomach dropped. The brake fluid reservoir small, usually invisible, unless you're looking at a hairline crack running along its base, big enough to see from 5 feet away. Barely big enough to see now, up close, with 20 years of experience, telling him exactly what to look for. Big enough. More than big enough. Every time she hit that front brake, hard, a tiny amount of fluid was weeping out of that crack and evaporating in the heat before anyone could see it. Level dropping, slowly, steadily. One hard stop away from catastrophic failure. Stood up. He needed to tell her. He looked toward the gate. She was still there with those 2 men and now a third had joined them. And all 4 of them were looking at something on one of their phones. Walked over. He got about 10 feet away when one of the big men shaved head, arms like bridge cables, a scar running through his left eyebrow, turned and looked directly at him. His face said everything his mouth didn't need to say. Keep walking. Marcus stopped. He held up one hand. Palm, not threatening, just present. "Excuse me," he said. "One. I need to talk to the woman with the black softail." The man with the scar didn't blink. "No, you don't. Front brake line has a friend." The man's voice dropped half an octave, which somehow made it quieter and louder at the same time. "Just say this once. Walk away." Marcus looked past him, toward the young woman who had now turned and was watching this exchange with curious eyes. Marcus called out over the big man's shoulder. "Brake fluid reservoir has a crack. You ride hard today, you're going to lose your front brakes. Could happen on the highway. Could happen at speed. One, you need to look at it before you ride again." Silence. The young woman stared at him, then she looked at her bike. She looked back at Marcus. "Danny," she said to the man with the scar. "Talk." Mini Climax 3, her name was Lily Carter. Marcus didn't know that yet. He only knew she was the one riding the softail, and she was the one who deserved to know the truth about her machine. To where he'd crouched by the bike and looked at what he was pointing at. He kept his hands to himself. He didn't touch anything, didn't reach for it, just showed her. He said, "You see that line? That's a fracture. See how it's slightly discolored along the base? The fluid's been weeping out in small amounts every time you put pressure on it. You might have 20 stops left, might have 2. Stared at the reservoir for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "How do you know that?" "I've been listening to your brakes for the last 20 minutes, Marcus said. "Because I've seen this exact thing happen on the track. It didn't stop when the driver needed it to. End of story." He looked up at him then. Really looked at him. Kind of look that takes in the worn jacket, the fraying backpack, the deep lines, in a face that's seen too much weather and too little comfort, but then goes past all of that and looks at the eyes. Just held her gaze. "You know engines?" she asked. "I used to," he said. "Long time ago." She straightened up, crossed her arms, and turned to Danny Rodriguez on the phone. "Tell him I need a new reservoir and fresh fluid in the next hour." Danny was already pulling out his phone. Lily turned back to Marcus. She said, "Don't ride it until it's fixed," Marcus said. A pause. "Can I ask your name?" He hesitated the way he always hesitated at that question, because names carry history, and history carries weight, and he'd spent 2 years trying to carry as little of both as possible. "Because," he said finally, "I'm Lily." She extended her hand. He shook it, and that was the beginning, though neither of them knew it yet. Twist 1 approx, 10-12 minute mark. What happened next, Marcus didn't see coming, and neither did anyone else. He turned to walk back toward the gas station. The job was done, he'd said. What needed to be said, she'd listened. The bike would be fixed. It was the end of it. He had no further role to play in Lily Carter's day. He was already fading back into the crowd, already becoming invisible again. Already the man no one would remember in an hour. As this almost back to the gas station curb when he heard the air change. It's the only way to describe it. The air changed. The quality of the noise around him shifted, a collective intake of breath from hundreds of people. That sound crowds make a half second before something terrible happens, like the world drawing in air for a scream it hasn't released yet. Marcus turned around. What he saw would stay with him for the rest of his life. When a semi-truck, a big Kenworth, the cab alone the size of a small room, had come off the highway overpass ramp at speed. Way too much speed. Driver must have missed the sign for the reduced speed zone, or the brakes had gone soft in the heat. Maybe he'd just been driving for 17 hours straight, and his reflexes were a beat too slow, whatever the reason. Truck came down that ramp like a boulder down a hill, and when it hit the flat and tried to correct, the trailer swung wide. It was enough to jackknife. It went one way. It went. The trailer went another. It went, and the whole massive rig toppled slowly at first. Then all at once, a tree falls directly into the festival entrance. He watched it happen in real time and felt his body go cold. Cause Lily Carter was standing right there. She'd been walking back toward the gate after their conversation. She'd been right there, in that spot, when 3,000 tons of jackknifed semi-truck came down on top of it. People screamed. People ran. People dropped to the ground, covered their heads, scattered in every direction, like birds from a gunshot. The sound was like the end of the world, metal, on concrete on metal. A roar that rolled through Marcus's chest and knocked a couple of loose teeth, fillings loose from the percussion of it. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that's worse than the noise. And in the middle of all of it, in the middle of the smoke and the settling dust and the screaming that had started back up from the edges of the crowd, there was a voice. But there, help, somebody help. Lily. Marcus didn't think. He ran. Mini climax 4. The crowd had formed a ring of people. Standing 10, 15 feet back from the wreckage, was raised, filming, talking, pointing on the phone with 911. Just standing there with their hands over their mouths, unable to do anything, unable to look away, unable to go forward. The truck had come to rest at an angle, the cab on its side, folded back, at nearly 90 degrees, a pocket of crushed space between them where Lily had been standing. Fuel was leaking. Marcus could see it spreading across the asphalt in a dark, shimmering sheet. Smell it? That sharp gasoline and diesel combination that tells your nervous system to run before your brain catches up. Someone near him say, "Don't go near it. The whole thing could go up." Someone else say, "Where are the paramedics?" He heard a third voice say, "A homeless guy is walking toward it. Somebody stop him. He's going to get himself killed." He didn't stop. He dropped his backpack at the edge of the clear zone, pulled a small kit out of the front pocket. Then just a few basic tools, the kind a mechanic carries out of habit even when they no longer have a reason to, and he kept moving. He grabbed his arm. He turned. A man his age, he said, wearing an iron Wolves prospect cut newer member patch. Newer patch, the kind of nervous energy that comes from wanting to prove himself but not knowing how. The man's face was white as paper. "You can't go in there, man. Fuel one spark and it's done." "Then don't spark it," Marcus said, his arm free, gently, and kept walking. He heard the man say something behind him. Maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. He couldn't tell. Toward the wreckage. Mini climax 5. The gap was small, maybe 18 inches between the side of the overturned cab and the buckle body of the nut trailer, that Marcus had to turn sideways and hold his breath and feel his way through. Hands on metal, reading the structure the way you read. A sentence, left to right, word by word. Looking for the meaning underneath. The bell was hot, not fire hot, not yet. But heat of summer, heat of friction, heat of mechanical violence, hot, the kind that presses through fabric and leaves pink marks on your palms. It didn't slow down. Inside the pocket between the cab and trailer, the light was low and strange, coming in from a gap above in a single shaft that moved as the wreckage settled and groaned around him. Sound in there was alive. Every few seconds, the metal would shift just slightly, just enough, and make a sound like a giant clearing its throat. A reminder, this isn't stable. Nothing here is stable. Wentz went toward the voice. "Hey," he called out. "Keep talking to me. Tell me where you are." Off. "Then here, I'm here. Left side, I can't move my leg." He followed the sound. It was pinned by a section of the cab's door frame. It had peeled back on impact and come to rest across her lower left leg. Not with enough force to crush bone, but enough to trap her completely. The way a finger trap works. The harder you pull, the tighter it holds. The helmet was cracked, but on. Her jacket had taken most of the abrasion damage from the fall. Conscious, alert, eyes wide and tracking. When she saw Marcus, ignition. Something moved across her face recognition first, then confusion, then something that looked like disbelief. "You," she said. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Me? What are you? How did you? I'm going to get you out." He was already on his knees, hands on the door frame, assessing. "Don't try to move. Let me look." "There's fuel on the ground," she said. "I can smell it." "I know, if it reaches the exhaust," he said again, calmly. kind of calm that comes from a man who has been in tight, dangerous, time-limited situations before, not because he was fearless, but because fear is most useful when it's quiet and focused, not loud and scattered. Scared? Lily asked. Marcus looked at her. He said, "Are you?" Terrified, she said. "Good," he said. "It means we're paying attention. Now be quiet and let me think." Climax 6. The door frame was steel, formed, but steel has rules. Marcus pressed his palm flat against it and felt the load where the weight was distributed, where the stress points were, where the thing wanted to move if given the chance. He'd done this with crumpled race cars. He'd done this with engines jammed at the wrong angle in frames that weren't designed for them. He'd done this his whole career. Before his career became a memory and his hands became something he hid in his pockets, he looked around the space. There was a section of the trailer's aluminum paneling that had buckled loose, maybe 4 feet long, curved slightly, solid enough to use as a lever if he could get it into the right position. "Anything on you?" he asked Lily. "Belt? Heavy bracelet? Anything I can use as a shim?" He thought for a second. Then, "Boot heel. It's composite. Take it." She reached down, unclipped the heel from her right boot with 2 quick motions. It was the kind designed for road mechanics. Release heel. For exactly this kind of situations. And Marcus had never been more grateful for a well-designed boot in his life. He said, "My father insists on gear that has a use," she said. Almost quietly, "He's going to be here soon." He saw the accident. Marcus didn't ask who her father was. He put the heel down as a contact point, angled the aluminum panel as a lever, applying steady, controlled pressure. The door frame groaned. Outside, someone in the crowd screamed, probably seeing the wreckage shift, and Marcus heard voices spike in volume. Everyone's out. Everyone watching. Everyone recording. No one else coming. He kept the pressure steady. "Talk to me," he said to Lily. "What?" "Anything. Your voice tells me you're staying conscious." Quiet for a moment. Then, "I've never had someone talk to me like that. Like everything was going to be fine." "Everything is going to be fine," Marcus said, pushing harder on the lever. "Sure about that?" "No," he admitted, "but I need you to be." Something shifted. The door frame gave just a fraction, just enough. "Your leg," Marcus said. "Now slowly, towards you." "Jerk it." She pulled. She hissed through her teeth. Pain, compression pain, the kind that comes from a limb that's been under load and suddenly isn't. But her leg came free, caught her before she could fall to the side and put pressure on it. "Stand on it." She tested it. "It's yeah, I think so." "Then we need to move, right now." Climax 7. They went back through the gap the way Marcus had come in him first, making sure the path was clear. Then her, his hands guiding her through the tight space by feel, by instinct, by the same mechanical intuition that had told him about her brake line an hour ago. Side. When they emerged from the wreckage, something strange happened. It went silent. Not all at once. It started at the edges, the people who saw them first, who lowered their phones, who put their hands over their mouths. And it spread inward, rippling through the crowd, like a stone dropped in still water. Until 400 people were standing in complete silence. A homeless man helped a woman in an Iron Wolves jacket limp away from a wreck that by now had already decided nobody was walking out of. Silence lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then a child somewhere in the crowd started clapping. Another person joined. Then another. And then all 400 of them were clapping the way people clap when they've watched something that didn't feel real. Something that broke through whatever invisible boundary separates a thing that happens to other people from a thing that happens right in front of you. He didn't look at them. He looked at Lily. "Okay?" She was leaning on his arm slightly, testing her leg. "I'm okay." She looked back at the truck. "I was in there." "I was actually in there." "You were," Marcus said. "And you came in after me." "Yeah." She turned and looked at him, the way she'd looked at him earlier. When he'd told her about the brake line, that full-on, unguarded look that most people don't give to strangers. "That means I see you, the actual you, not the category I put you in?" she asked. Marcus considered that. "Because you needed help," he said simply. because the moment felt like it required a little more, and I was the only one who moved. Jaw tightened, not in anger, in something much more complicated. You shouldn't have been the only one, she said. No, Marcus agreed. Probably not. Mini-climax 8 audience retention hook. Medics arrived. 90 seconds later, he moved toward Lily first, which made sense. He was the one visibly injured. And Marcus stepped back immediately when making room when melting toward the edge of the activity the way he always did when official people arrived anywhere. Old habit. When you live on the margins, you learn that official people and homeless people rarely mix well. He bent down and picked up his backpack from where he dropped it. He put it over his shoulder. He turned to walk away. That's when he heard it. The sound of motorcycles, not the festival kind, the dispersed individual kind coming from the direction of the highway. 1 or 2, maybe 30, riding in formation. Fast. The Iron Wolves, the real ones, not the prospects and members who'd been at the festival. The inner circle. The inner circle, the senior riders, the ones with road-worn patches and faces that had been through things they didn't talk about in polite company. In front of the formation, on a matte gray heritage classic that looked like it had ridden 100,000 miles and intended to ride 100,000 more. The man who made the crowd instinctively part for him before he'd even stopped the bike. Tall, heavy through the shoulders, silver hair pulled back, a face like a topographic map of hard decisions and harder consequences. Eyes that were already scanning for his daughters, scanning for threat, scanning for information, with the practiced speed of a man who had learned long ago that hesitation costs you. He found Lily before he'd even fully stopped the bike. He was off it before it had stopped rocking. He crossed the distance in long, deliberate strides, and the crowd parted for him like water parts for a stone dropped from height. He took Lily's face in both hands. Are you hurt? Dad. She caught his wrists. I'm okay. My leg is going to bruise, but I'm okay. Victor Carter looked at his daughter for a long moment. The kind of look that takes inventory, checking every detail, every breath, counting every breath, making sure the thing that matters most to him in the world is actually, truly, the one undeniably intact. Then his eyes moved. They swept the scene, the wreckage, the paramedics, the people still recording on their phones. And they landed on Marcus, who was at this moment, he went 17 feet away, returned. Zon's one backpack over one shoulder. In the process of disappearing, is that, Victor Carter said. Lily turned. For the first time since they'd come out of the wreckage, saw something that made him almost smile, because Lily Carter, the daughter of the man they said, made entire towns go silent, tracked him through the crowd with the same automatic ease as her father, recognizing like, that's the man who pulled me out, she said. Victor Carter looked at Marcus, and Marcus, for the first time in 2 years, didn't look away. Many climax. 9 Victor didn't speak right away. The thing about him, Marcus would come to understand this later. Victor Carter never rushed into speech. He listened first. He observed first. He let information come to him, let it settle, let it find its proper shape before he responded to it. The quality that had kept him alive and in power in a world that rewards neither patience nor mercy, and most people read it as coldness. Cold. It was deliberate. Victor walked toward Marcus. Not fast, not slow. The pace of a man who knows nobody's going anywhere until he decides they are. God watched. The paramedics watched. Danny, the man with the scar on his eyebrow, put one hand inside his jacket. Victor held up 2 fingers without looking at him, and the hand came back out. Victor stopped in front of Marcus. He was slightly taller, slightly heavier. He smelled like road and leather and something faintly like cedar. He looked at Marcus for a long moment, the same kind of full, guarded look his daughter had given, except where Lily's held surprise and gratitude, Victor's held calculation and something harder to name. Not exactly, more like measurement. You went in after her, Victor said. Not question. Yes, Marcus said, alone, when nobody else would. Marcus didn't answer that one. Seemed self-evident. Why? Victor asked. Marcus had already answered this question once today. Answered it again. Because she needed help. Held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he said, "What's your name?" "Hale." "Marcus Hale." Victor repeated it slowly, the way you repeat something you want to remember. "Marcus Hale." And here it was. The moment Marcus had braced himself for 100 times in 100 different situations. Over the past 2 years, the moment where the truth of the situation landed in the middle of a conversation like a stone through a window, changing the shape of everything, rearranging people's faces into something between pity and discomfort. "Live at the gas station on Route 9, Marcus said. "The back lot." Victor didn't blink. He didn't change expression. He said, very quietly, "You live at the gas station?" "Yes." "And you came out here to the highway, and you went under a burning truck for my daughter." Another long pause. "Most people didn't move," Victor said. "People were scared," Marcus said. "Were you?" I told her I was. Something shifted in Victor Carter's face. Barely. Just enough. A fractional softening around the eyes that lasted maybe a second and a half before his face went back to what it usually was. Marcus saw it, and Marcus realized, knew he'd seen it. "Go anywhere," Victor said. "I'd like to talk," and walked back to Lily. Marcus stood where he was. He looked down at his hands. Those mechanics' hands. His hands that had once built winning engines and now held nothing. And now, tonight, had done the only useful thing they'd done in 2 years. Shaking. They shook for about 30 seconds. Then they stopped. And Marcus stood in the middle of 400 people, all of whom were watching him, all of whom were seeing him really, fully seeing him for the first time. And it felt like standing in a light he'd forgotten existed. Mini climax, 10 end of part 1 hold. Much later, when the cameras were gone, and the wreckage had been cleared, and the festival had suspended its music, and the ambulance had taken Lily to the hospital for observation, one of the young Iron Wolves prospects came up to Marcus, the same one who'd grabbed his arm, the heavy-set one with the white face. His face was a different color now. He stood in front of Marcus, and he didn't say anything for a moment. He was working something out. You could see it, the calculation of pride versus honesty, the way a man weighs what he owes against what it costs him to admit it. He said, "I told you not to go in." "I heard you," Marcus said. "It's wrong." "You were scared," Marcus said. "That's not wrong." Don Wentz. The young man looked at him. "I've been riding with the wolves for 3 years. I've been in situations that I thought I was brave." He shook his head. "Done anything like what you did today?" This was quiet for a moment. Then neither had I. A long time. The young man nodded slowly. Then he stuck out his hand, shook it. The young man's name, Marcus would learn later, was Ray Montoya, 26 years old. He'd grown up in this town, grown up watching motorcycles go by on this highway, grown up wanting to be part of something that felt bigger than himself. Joined the Wolves because of that feeling. And today, he'd learned something about himself that he'd spent a long time trying to make peace with. The last time, Marcus Hale would change the shape of someone's understanding of themselves. It was the first. And it started here in a gas station parking lot on a July morning, with a brake squeal that nobody else heard and a choice that nobody else made. The man nobody saw. In the moment, nobody forgot. The ambulance left without sirens. The detail that stayed with Marcus long after everything else blurred together the fact that they didn't turn the sirens on. It didn't. Lights. Just the lights, slow and steady, rolling away from us with Lily Carter inside, and the whole crowd watching it go in a silence that had a different texture now than the silence right after the crash. Silence had been shock. This one was something else. It was the silence of people who had seen something they couldn't fully process yet, something that fit and didn't into the categories they'd brought with them to the festival that morning. Montoya was still standing near Marcus when the ambulance turned onto the highway. "He's going to be okay," Ray said. It wasn't a question. It's the thing you say when you need it to be true. Her leg took some compression, Marcus said, but she was alert, responsive. No signs of spinal involvement. Be sore for a week. She'll be okay. Ray looked at him sideways. "Hey, doctor." "No," Marcus said. "I've just seen crash injuries before." He didn't elaborate. Ray didn't push. That was one thing Marcus had noticed about men who ran with clubs like the Iron Wolves. They understood that some answers come in their own time, or they don't come at all. And either way, you don't push. Victor Carter was still there. He was standing 30 feet away, talking to three of his senior men in voices too low to carry. His back was to Marcus, but Marcus had the distinct feeling, the animal feeling, the kind that doesn't come from logic, but from something older and more reliable, that Victor Carter was acutely aware of exactly where Marcus was standing at all times. A compass needle that always knows north. One of Victor's men glanced over at Marcus, then looked back at Victor, said something. Victor nodded once, short and deliberate, and the man pulled out his phone, shifted his backpack on his shoulder. He thought, not for the first time, in the last 20 minutes, about leaving. About just walking back to the gas station, sitting back down on his piece of cardboard, drinking whatever was left of the gas station coffee, and letting this day fold back into all the other days. It'd be easy. Nobody would stop him. Victor Carter had said, "Don't go anywhere." Victor Carter didn't own him. Marx had spent 2 years belonging to nobody and answering to nothing, and that had its own kind of freedom, even when it didn't feel like it. Stayed. He wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe because a part of him, a part that had been quiet for so long he'd almost forgotten it existed, wanted to see what happened next. Victor Carter turned around. He walked back to Marcus with that same measured pace, and this time one of his senior men came with him. The guy. This 60, maybe 60, with a white beard and glasses that looked incongruous on a man wearing road leathers like a professor who'd made a very specific lifestyle choice somewhere around his 40th birthday. "This is Garrett," Victor said, by way of introduction. "He handles things for us." Marcus nodded at Garrett, nodded back without smiling, but without hostility either. Not of a man who reserves judgment as a professional habit. Victor said, "I'd like to know who you are." "You know my name," Marcus said. "I know what you told me your name is," Victor said. "That's not the same thing." He paused. "The way you went into that wreckage, that wasn't the first time you've been in a dangerous situation and stayed calm. And the way you talked about her injuries, that's not something you learn watching YouTube videos." "I'll ask again. Who are you?" Marcus looked at him for a moment. He said, "I used to be a mechanic, race circuits primarily, engine builds, and crash recovery for 3 teams over about 15 years, mostly Southwest and Midwest circuits, some national level stuff near the end." Victor's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Teams. Vega Motorsport, Raines Brothers out of Tucson. This one was Precision Drive. We ran 4 seasons out of Phoenix before the team folded." Jake was quiet. Then he looked at Garrett. Garrett was already typing something on his phone. "What happened?" Victor asked. "After the team folded was the second wall. Marcus hit, in the space of an hour, the second place where truth and pride met each other. Head on, and you had to decide which one wins." "Things fell apart," Marcus said. "Personally, lost my wife, my son, lost the business." He said it the way you say things that have been said so many times inside your own head that they've worn smooth, like river stones, still heavy. But the edges are gone. The time I came up for air, I didn't have anything left to come back to. So I stopped trying. Victor held his gaze throughout all of that, without flinching, without the awkward look away that most people do when someone's pain gets too real for social comfort. Listened. When Marcus finished, Victor said, "How long have you been at the gas station?" "Up on 2 years. 2 years, Victor repeated. Very quietly, almost to himself. He did. 2 years. Said something near Victor's ear. Victor glanced at the phone. Garrett was holding out something. Nodded. Precision Drive, Victor said. Name is in their race records. I imagine it is, Marcus said. Chief mechanical engineer. 2 regional championship seasons. Victor handed the phone back to Garrett and looked at Marcus with the expression of a man who has just confirmed something he already suspected, but needed to verify. "You've been sleeping behind a gas station," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't pity. It was just a man reckoning with information, Marcus said. "And you went into that wreck anyway." Yes. With 2 years of nothing going for you, with no reason to expect anything from anyone, with no obligation to my daughter whatsoever, you went in. Victor Carter looked at Marcus Hale for a long moment. And then he said something that Marcus didn't expect. He said, "I'm sorry." Marcus blinked. "What?" "Not for what happened today," Victor said. "The fact that a man with your history ended up where you are, and nobody in this town, nobody in this whole system caught it. I'm not apologizing on their behalf. I'm saying I'm sorry it happened, because it shouldn't have." Marcus had been prepared for a lot of responses. Gratitude, the polite but distant warmth of someone who wants to give you a check and sends you on your way. He had not been prepared for that. He hadn't been prepared for someone to just acknowledge the wrong of it. Without drama, his chest did something complicated. He looked away for a second. "You don't owe me an apology," he said. Victor agreed. "But I'm giving you one anyway." Then he said, "Now, I told you I wanted to talk, so let's talk." He gestured toward a row of bikes parked along the road where his men were gathered, and Marcus, not quite knowing why, not quite knowing what he was walking into, followed. Because something had shifted. Something fundamental. Boss Hale, who had spent 2 years making himself as small as possible, found himself suddenly unwilling to disappear again. Not today. Victor's men moved when their leader moved, a loose arrangement, not circling Marcus, not surrounding him, but present in the way bodyguards are present, aware of angles and exits in a way that most people never have to be. Noticed it and filed it away. He'd been around enough competitive team environments to recognize men who operated in professional formation without being told to. They sat Victor on the step of a nearby work truck that someone had pulled up, Marcus on the running board across from him, standing just off to the side with his glasses and his phone and his air of a man who is always 3 steps ahead of whatever's happening. "About the brake line," Victor said. Marcus looked at him. "About it. You spotted it from the curb, at a distance." The crowd. "How?" "I heard it first," Marcus said. Consistent brake squeal, front caliper, not rear, because of how it varied with her speed. It tells you right away it's not a pad issue. It's a pressure issue. One weeping somewhere in the system. Once I knew what I was listening for. Seeing the reservoir crack was just confirmation. Nodded slowly. "She's had that bike looked at twice this month. Different mechanics. Hairline cracks are easy to miss if you're not specifically looking for fluid loss along the base of the reservoir," Marcus said. "Mechanics check the fluid level and call it good." To get down close and look at the housing itself. Mechanics missed it. "Yes, you caught it in 20 minutes. Shrugged. "I wasn't doing anything else." Victor almost smiled. A brief thing there, and gone in under a second, like a light in a window when someone walks past in a room. But Marcus caught it. "You said you haven't worked in 2 years," Victor said. Professionally, but you still know what you know." "Forget," Marcus said. "You might wish you could sometimes, but you don't forget." Victor leaned forward, elbows on knees, and looked at Marcus directly. "My club has a repair garage. North side of town. We maintain the bikes, we do custom builds, and we take in outside work from the community paying work. It's a legitimate business. We have 3 mechanics on staff." A pause. Would have caught that brake line. Marcus was quiet. "I'm not offering you charity," Victor said, preemptively. Like he'd read the refusal already forming in Marcus's expression. "I'm not doing this because I feel bad for you, or because I owe you some kind of debt. I'm doing this because you have skills my operation needs, and I am a man who recognizes value when it's standing in front of me." He paused. Everyone else has been looking right through it. He looked down at his hands. "I'm not the same man I was," he said. Victor said, "That's not what I'm asking you to be. Worked a full day in 2 years. My hands." He stopped. "I don't know if I can still do it. Not at a level that's worth paying for." "I'm not asking you what you think you're worth," Victor said. "I'm telling you what I think you're worth. Those are 2 different conversations, and only one of them matters to me right now." Something tightened in Marcus's throat. He cleared it. "The arrangement look like?" he asked. "The next 20 minutes. Victor Carter, The man, they said, made entire towns go quiet, sat on the step of a work truck in the middle of a festival that had stopped being a festival and became something else entirely, and talked to the homeless man from the gas station, lot like they were two equals figuring something out together. Because in that moment, that's exactly what they were. Said no, not loudly, not dramatically. He heard Victor out completely. One asked three technical questions that Garrett made notes of about it. For the length of time it takes a serious man to think about a serious thing. One and said simply, listen, quietly no. Victor wasn't angry. He looked at Marcus with the expression of a man recalibrating. Why? He said. Because I'm not ready, Marcus said. I want to take something I'm not ready for and do it badly and prove to both of us that you were wrong about me. That's honest, Victor said. I've had enough of lying to myself, Marcus said. It's how I got here. Victor was quiet for a moment. What would make you ready? Time, Marcus said. And a place to work, that's mine. A corner somewhere, a bench, some basic tools. Start small and remember what I know before anyone's counting on me to know it. Victor looked at him steadily. That's a specific answer, he said. 2 years to think about what I'd need if I ever decided to come back, Marcus said. Didn't think I was going to decide. What changed? Victor asked. Thought about Lily in that wreckage. About hearing her voice in the dark and moving toward it without thinking. He bet about that moment when his hands had found the lever and the calculation had come back to him clean. Exact, the language of machines that had been his first language and his truest one. Remembered that I'm still useful, Marcus said. That's all. Victor studied him for a long moment. Then he stood up, extended his hand, lens, and said, your bench. You'll have your bench, whatever time you need. The offer stays open. Shook his hand. Garrett handed Victor his phone. Victor typed something, then handed it back. Garrett held it out toward Marcus. Direct number, Garrett said. When you're ready. Took the card that Garrett produced from somewhere is inside his jacket. At it. Put it in his backpack's front pocket next to the tools. Up. Victor said, one more thing. Marcus looked at him. You sleeping tonight? The question landed with a weight that surprised Marcus. Not because it was inappropriate, it wasn't. Because it was so direct, so practical, so stripped of the usual social cushioning that people wrap around uncomfortable realities to make them easier for the asker to bear. Places last night, Marcus said. Victor nodded. He looked at Garrett. Garrett was already on the phone. There's a room above the garage, Victor said. It's not much. Bathroom, working heat and AC. It's been sitting empty for 3 months. He looked at Marcus directly. It's not charity. It's a working facility for a working man. When you're ready to work, it's part of the arrangement. Consider it a place to be. Marcus stood very still. He'd been offered things before. In shelters, in the church on Route 7, once by a man outside a diner who turned out to want something back that Marcus wasn't willing to give, to brace himself against offers. Learn to find the hook hidden inside the help. He looked for the hook now. He didn't find one. Why? He asked. Victor looked at him with absolute steadiness. Because my daughter is alive, he said, and you're the reason. And I'm not the kind of man who lets that go unmarked. He paused because he said, a little quieter, man who does what you did today should not be sleeping on cardboard behind a gas station. It's just a fact, not charity, just a fact. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. When he did, he said, I'll think about it. Fast, Victor said. Garrett will drive you there if you decide yes. And walked back to his men. Then he turned and walked back to his men, and the conversation was over, and Marcus was left standing in the middle of what used to be a festival with a business card in his backpack and an offer he couldn't quite make himself believe was real. The call came at 4:17 in the afternoon. This was back at the gas station, sitting on his card. Board backpack between his feet, the fab between the festival noise now reduced to a distant murmur as the organizers dealt with the aftermath and the crowds thinned out. Lowe's, the gas station manager, had come out twice to look at him. Times he'd gone back inside without saying anything. Time He brought Marcus a cup of coffee without being asked. He set it down on the ground next to Marcus. He stood there for a second. You did, Phil said, finally, on the news app. Footage. Marcus looked up. Already? Phil shifted his weight. Someone had it up in under 10 minutes. It's out there. He paused. There's a lot of comments. Want to know? Marcus said. Okay, Phil said. He didn't move. Marcus waited. What it's worth. Phil said, Ethan, I mean, your ways let you be because you weren't hurting anything. But I never, he stopped. Started again. I should have known your name. You've been here 2 years, and I didn't even know your name. Marcus said, yeah? The coffee's good, Marcus said. Phil nodded once hard, like someone physically closing a door on something. He went back inside. The call came 20 minutes after that. It was a number Marcus didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He rarely answered unknown numbers because the calls that came to prepaid phones from unknown numbers were rarely calls you wanted to receive. Something made him pick up. Marcus Hale? A woman's voice. Professional. Calm. Yes. I'm calling from St. Andrew's Medical Center when I'm a patient coordinator. A pause. A patient here asked us to contact you. We'd like to see you. If you're willing to come. It's already new. Lily Carter, he said. Yes, sir. Quiet for a moment. How is she? He asked. She's doing well. The leg is bruised, not broken. She's been cleared of any internal injuries. She'll be discharged this evening. Another pause. She's been asking for you. Since she woke up from sedation, she was fairly insistent. I'll come, Marcus said. Stood up, brushed himself off, picked up his backpack. Denny was watching through the gas station window again. Time, Marcus caught his eye. Denny gave him a small, uncertain wave. Nodded. Then he walked toward town. He'd been to St. Andrews once before. In his early days in Red Valley, a bad night. Weather. A cough that had gone deep into his chest and scared him more than he'd admitted to himself at the time. Who'd seen him had been kind. He'd left before morning to avoid the billing conversation, but he'd remembered the kindness. The lobby was different. In the afternoon, full of the ordinary noise of a working hospital, phones and announcements and the sound of rubber wheels on linoleum. He looked at Marcus twice when he walked in, gave his name. He went to the front desk, gave his name, and within 2 minutes, a young orderly was walking him through 2 sets of swinging doors and down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and whatever they put in hospital air to make it feel neutral. 214. The orderly knocked twice and opened the door. Lily was sitting up in the bed, leg elevated, a tablet in her lap that she immediately set aside when Marcus walked in. Better than she had in the wreckage. The color upper was back in her face, and the tight, controlled expression of someone managing pain had relaxed into something more natural. She still had a scrape along her left jaw from the initial impact. He looked at him. He looked at her. You came, she said. He said. She gestured toward the chair beside the bed. He sat. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The kind of silence that 2 people share. After they've been through something together, not comfortable exactly, but not comfortable, not uncomfortable either. Silence of shared experience that doesn't need narrating. My father told me about your conversation, she said. He told me you said no, I did. He said you were the first person who said no to him in approximately 4 years. She paused. He wasn't upset. I think he was impressed. Your father doesn't seem like a man who impresses easily. Marcus said. Lily said. That's why I said it. She looked at her hands for a moment, then back at him. Can I ask you something? You can ask. When you were in there in the wreckage, scared the whole time? Or did something else take over? Thought about that, honestly. Both, he said. It doesn't go away. You don't push it down and do brave things anyway. You give the fear a job. You make it useful. It sharpens you. Makes you notice things you'd miss if you were calm. He paused. Told me where the unstable points were. Told me how fast to move. It's good information if you know how to read it. Stared at him. Where did you learn that? She said. Years. Of watching what happens when mechanics panic versus when they don't, Marcus said. Panicked people make small mistakes that become large problems. But focused people make good decisions fast. You didn't panic, she said. Not where you could see it, he said honestly. Once she almost laughed. Almost. It stopped just short of a laugh and became something quieter. Something that lived in the same neighborhood as gratitude and something more personal. To tell you something, she said. And I want you to just hear it without deflecting it or sending it back at me or minimizing it. Said nothing, which was its own kind of agreement. I thought I was going to die in there, she said. Not in the abstract way people say that. I mean, I was conscious the whole time. The impact after I realized I was pinned and I could smell the fuel and I could feel the metal moving around me. I calculated my odds. I've been around enough incidents to know what a burning vehicle does and how fast it does it. When I thought this is it, this is how it ends. She paused, and then I heard a voice. Marcus was very still. I'm getting you out, she said it quietly. Not performing it, just recalling it. Didn't know who it was. I couldn't see anything. The voice it was so certain, not falsely certain, not the fake confidence. That's really just somebody yelling to drown out their own fear. It's the real kind. The kind that comes from someone who actually knows what they're doing. She looked at him. You. Yes, Marcus said. You reminded me, she said, that there are still people in the world who move toward the thing everyone else is running from. I'd stopped believing that. I'd seen enough of the opposite to start thinking it was the exception. She paused. You proved me wrong. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. You don't owe me anything, he said. In case that's what this is. It's not, she said immediately. I know what I owe, and I know what I give freely. And those are two completely different ledgers in my life. This is the second one. Marcus said nothing. My father offered you the garage position, she said. And you said no. I said not yet. She considered that distinction. What's the difference? No closes a door, he said. Not yet leaves it open. She nodded slowly, like something had just confirmed itself. What would it take, she said, for you to walk through it? Marcus answered her the same way. He'd answered her father honestly, specifically without performance. He told her about the bench, about the time, about the need to find his own hands again before he trusted them with someone else's machines. He told her about the 2 years and what they'd done to him, not dramatically, but truthfully. He told her that he wasn't sure he was still the man his reputation said he was, and that he needed to find out for himself before he let anyone else find out. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, I know what it is to lose your sense of yourself and have to find it again. It took me a long time, after a situation I don't need to go into, to feel like my instincts were mine again. She held his gaze. Believe your instincts are still yours, Marcus. Believe that because I'm alive. But I understand that you need to believe it too. Quiet. Dawn. Somewhere down the hall, monitor beep, steadily, evenly, the way the world goes on, even when things inside it are breaking and being rebuilt. Said, your father offered the room above the garage. She said, I told him I'd think about it. I'm still thinking. She looked at him directly. Is what I know about my father. He has offered that room to exactly 2 people in the 6 years that garage has been operating. Took it. And is now running his own shop in Flagstaff. One turned it down, and my father never offered again. She paused. He doesn't repeat himself. That sounds like him, Marcus said. Think fast, she said. And somehow coming from her, it wasn't pressure. It was something more like care. It was something more like care. The kind of directness that comes from people who respect you enough to be honest with you, who believe you can handle the truth without having it wrapped in softness first. Stood up. He picked up his backpack. He stood at the door for a moment with his hand on the frame. He turned back. Tell your father, he said, that I'm ready to see the room. He looked at him for a moment. Then she said, quietly, with a certainty that felt older than her face suggested she should have, he'll be glad. I'm also, Marcus said, that I'm still not ready for the job, but I'm ready to start being ready. She nodded. That's enough, she said. That's enough. Marcus left. He walked down the hallway and through the swinging doors and back out into the late afternoon where the sun was dropping toward the red rock horizon, and the highway noise was beginning to thin. One. And the gas station on Route 9 was going to be the last night's sleep he had on cardboard, because something had opened. Not all the way, not yet. Open was open, and Marcus Hale, who had spent 2 years closing himself off from everything that might require him to be more than what he'd become, walked toward the garage on the north side of town with his backpack over one shoulder and his hands, those mechanic's hands, his hands that still remembered everything, hanging loose at his sides. Ready, Garrett drove him there himself, not one of the prospects, junior man. None. Garrett, the one with the white beard and the professor glasses and the phone that always seemed to have the answer before the question finished being asked. He pulled up to the gas station in a clean black pickup 20 minutes after Marcus had walked back from the hospital. Fonts, he didn't honk again, didn't call out when, just parked and waited with the engine running. Saw him through the window of the gas station where he'd gone inside to return Phil's coffee mug. Phil was behind the counter watching the news on a small mounted screen, which was playing again the angle from someone's phone, shaky but clear enough, showing Count's backpack and marking toward the burning truck and walking toward the burning truck while the crowd stood frozen around him. At the bottom of the screen read, "Mystery Hero pulls biker from wreckage at Red Valley Festival." Muted it when Marcus came in. Returning the mug, Marcus said, took it. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the screen. Looked back at Marcus. "That's you," he said. "Yes. Calling you a mystery hero because nobody knows your name yet." "Change," Marcus said. "You okay with that?" Thought about it honestly. "I don't know yet," he said. "Me in a week." Phil set the mug down on the counter, reached under it and produced something, a key, old brass, on a plain ring, and held it out across the counter. Just looked at it. "What's that?" "Back storage room," Phil said. "Cot in it. Some of my guys sleep there on long shifts. It's not much, but if I mean, you don't have to. Should have offered before. I should have offered a long time ago, and I didn't. That's on me." He pushed the key forward. "If you need it." Marcus looked at the key. He thought about Lily in that hospital room. "Think fast." "Appreciate it," Marcus said. "I mean that. But I think I've got somewhere to be tonight." Phil nodded. He pulled the key back. He nodded again, more to himself than to Marcus, the way a man nods when he's making a private accounting of his own failures. Phil said, "Okay, you need anything, you know where I am." Put out his hand. Phil shook it. And that handshake, that simple, overdue, 2 years, too late handshake said more than either of them could have managed in words. Just walked out and got in Garrett's truck. They drove north. Wasn't a talker. That was fine. This wasn't either. Not anymore. And the silence between them in the truck cab was the comfortable kind. Two men who didn't need to fill space to prove they were present. The town rolled past outside. Route 9, giving way to the smaller residential roads on the north side, gas stations and fast food. Places thinning out into something quieter and older. Buildings, history in them. Garage was on a corner lot. Solid structure, well maintained. Above the bay doors read, "Red Valley Custom and Repair," in clean, unfussy lettering. No iron wolves, branding visible from the street, deliberate. Marcus guessed. Dirk Carter was a man who kept his worlds from colliding when he could manage it. Unlocked the side door and led Marcus through the shop floor. It was dark, late enough that the workday was done and the bays were quiet and still. Walked through slowly, his eyes adjusting, and what he felt in his chest walking through that space was something he hadn't felt in 2 years and hadn't expected to feel tonight. Ignition. Smell of it, metal and oil and rubber, and the faint chemical undertone of brake, fluid, and solvent hit him like a physical thing, like walking into a room where someone you loved used to live and catching the ghost of their presence in the air. His hands flexed, open, closed. Open. Garrett watched him without comment. It was a workbench along the far wall, solid, well-mounted, with a pegboard above it that had tool outlines marked in black. Most of the hooks were empty. Someone had been here recently enough that the bench surface was clean, wiped down, waiting, stood in front of it. He put both hands flat on the surface. The wood was cool under his palms. Solid. He pressed down and felt the bench not move at all, anchored properly into the wall studs built by someone who knew that a workbench that wobbles is a workbench that lies to you. Everyone. Victor had it cleared out this afternoon, Garrett said from behind him. Your conversation. Marcus turned. Before I said yes, Garrett said. He was sure. He's rarely wrong about people, Garrett said. It was in sycophancy. It was just a man stating a fact he'd observed over a long professional association. Let's look back at the bench. The room's upstairs, Garrett said. Show you. The room was exactly what Victor had said, a cot, a bathroom, heat and AC, and a window that looked out over the back lot. Someone had put clean sheets on the cot and a towel on the rack in the bathroom that still had the fold lines in it, fresh from a package. A small table, a lamp, a chair, nothing extra, nothing performative. The things a person needed. Marcus set his backpack on the chair. He sat on the edge of the cot. Garrett stood in the doorway. Food in the mini fridge, he said. Victor's wife sent it over. She does that when someone's staying up here. A pause. Her name is Elena. She'll probably bring something hot tomorrow morning. Recommend not trying to refuse it. Noted, Marcus said. Looked at him for a moment. You doing all right? Question surprised Marcus, not because it was asked, but because of how it was asked. Without ceremony, without the careful social distance that people maintain when they're checking on someone they don't quite know how to categorize. Straight. I'm not sure, Marcus said honestly. It's me in the morning. Garrett nodded. He pulled a card from his jacket, a different one from the one he'd given earlier, handwritten this time, with a number and the word Garrett and nothing else. It's my cell. Not the business line. If you need anything tonight, you call that. Marcus heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard the side door close, heard the truck start and pull away. And it was quiet. The kind of quiet that's different from the quiet behind a gas station. Quiet had been the quiet of absence, the world happening somewhere else. Beyond a perimeter Marcus had set for himself. Quiet was different. This quiet was the quiet of a place that had absorbed years of work and purpose and was now holding that history in its walls, and Marcus was inside it. He lay back on the cot without changing his clothes. The ceiling. He thought about his wife, about Daniel, his son, to be 19. Now, the one who Marcus had last seen at 11 years old, who lived in Phoenix with Marcus's sister-in-law, and who Marcus had written 4 letters to and Nessa sent because he couldn't find a version of himself that deserved to send them. About Lily Carter's face in the dark of that wreckage. Look of disbelief when she'd seen him, not disbelief that someone was there, but disbelief at who it was. The homeless man, the nobody, the one who wasn't supposed to matter. He thought about what she'd said. You saved my life because you believed mine mattered. Time you believe yours matters too. He closed his eyes. He slept better than he had in 2 years. The morning came fast, and it came with Elena Carter. He heard the door downstairs at 7:15 and was on his feet before he'd fully processed the sound, and old instincts snapping him upright with his heart already moving. Then he smelled it, eggs, something with peppers, fresh coffee, and his heart settled back into its normal register. Downstairs. He went downstairs. Elena Carter was not what he'd expected, though he couldn't have said exactly what he had expected. Maybe 50, compact and capable looking, with Victor's same quality of absolute presence in whatever space she occupied. She moved through the garage kitchen, a small area off the back of the shop that Marcus hadn't noticed the night before, like someone completely at home. He looked up when Marcus came in with the same directness her husband and daughter shared, like it was a family trait they'd all agreed on. She said, "Sit down. Have you eaten?" "Not recently," he said. "Sit." He sat. She put a plate in front of him that had enough food on it for 2 men and a coffee mug that she filled without asking how he took it. She sat across from him with her own coffee and watched him with an expression that was warm but not soft. The expression of a woman who has spent a lifetime separating what's real from what's performance and has gotten very good at it. Victor told me about you, she said. What did he tell you? Important things, she said. That you lost your family and your work and your way. You've been living rough for 2 years. That you went into a burning truck for my daughter. She paused. She said you reminded him of someone. Who? Marcus asked. She said, 25 years ago, before he found his way back. He looked at her. He didn't tell me that part, Marcus said. He wouldn't, she said. Victor doesn't use his own story to make points. That's self-serving. She held her mug in both hands. But I've known him long enough to tell you it's true. There was a time when Victor Carter had nothing and nobody and had made choices he couldn't unmake. Someone gave him a bench in a room and said, start here. He did. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Who was it? He asked. His uncle, Elena said. Dead now, but Victor has never forgotten it. He's been looking for the chance to do the same thing for someone else for 15 years. She looked at Marcus steadily. Usually find the right person. How does he know I'm the right person? Marcus asked. Because the right person, Elena said, always says I'm not ready before they say yes. Ones never do. The first week was the hardest. Because anyone asked too much of him. Nobody asked anything of him. Victor was true to his word. The bench was Marcus's. The tools were there. And the expectation was nothing beyond what Marcus set for himself each morning. It was the hardest part. When the expectation is nothing, you find out very quickly what you actually expect from yourself. Day. Marcus spent 4 hours just organizing the bench. Tools by function, checking edges, oiling hinges on a wrench set that had gotten stiff from disuse. Work. Methodical. The kind of thing that doesn't require your whole brain, but keeps your hands honest. Mechanics on staff, Bobby, the 3-year-old, with tattoos up both forearms. Inez, a woman in her mid-40s, who had forgotten more about carburetor systems than most people ever learned. And a young man named Cass, who was 22 and still in the stage of his career, where he believed speed was the same thing as skill. They treated Marcus with a careful neutrality at first. Not unfriendly, not warm. The way experienced craftspeople treat someone new in their workspace, watching, debating, calibrating, reserving judgment until they see what the person actually does with their hands. Relation didn't take long. Key day. On the third day, Inez was working on a vintage Triumph Bonneville, her third diagnostic on a fuel delivery problem she couldn't pin down, and she made a sound, not a word. Just that particular sound of frustrated, concentration that comes from a skilled person who is stuck and knows it. This was at his bench. He didn't look up right away. He said, what year is it? Inez looked at him. Carb? Yeah, check the tickler valve, Marcus said. On old Amals, the tickler pin seizes in the position it's been left most. If the bike sat for a long time, the float chamber's probably delivering inconsistently because the tickler's holding the float off center. Then the sound of tools moving, then a pause. Son of a, Inez said. Then, not in frustration, in the specific tone of someone who has just found the thing they were looking for. He looked up from his own bay. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Inez. He looked back at Marcus. How did you know that? Bobby said. We've met this problem before, Marcus said, on a 66. An owner, same situation. Bobby looked at him for a long moment with the expression of a man reassessing a calculation he'd thought was finished. That the neutrality warmed. Not all the way, not immediately. These were careful people in a careful world, and trust in a garage is earned in increments, in the small accumulated proofs that a person knows what they're doing and does it honestly. Picture changed. Small things. Bobby started leaving his coffee pot within reach of Marcus's bench. Inez started asking questions, direct technical questions that she didn't need the answers to, but wanted Marcus's take on anyway. Cass started hanging around Marcus's bench during his lunch break, watching Marcus work with the attentiveness of a young person who has just recognized someone they can learn something real from. Taught him without making it a lesson. It was the only way he knew how just doing the thing right loud. Eating his process, gone. Letting the other person decide what to take from it. Talking through your hands. Cass said, One afternoon, my first teacher told me, Marcus said. He said, if you can't say what you're doing while you're doing it, you don't fully understand it yet. You're doing something too complicated to talk through. You break it down until it isn't, Marcus said. Thing complicated is just simple things happening in sequence. Find the sequence, find the language for each step, and suddenly it's not complicated anymore. It's just long. Cass was quiet for a moment. Then, who was your first teacher? Paused on the part he was working on. Turned it over in his hands. Father, he said. He had a shop, nothing big. Farm equipment and pickup trucks. But he knew machines the way some people know. Music, like there was a language in them that the rest of the world couldn't quite hear. Is he still around? No, Marcus said. He's been gone a long time. Did he know you worked on race teams? He died before that, Marcus said. That. But he would have liked it. He always said the difference between a good mechanic and a great one is how fast the machine responds to being understood. He paused. Teams live or die on that margin. Cass absorbed this in the way young people absorb things that land at exactly the right moment, completely, permanently, the way a key finds the right lock. You want to be great, Cass said. Not boastfully, just clearly. You state a true fact. Then stop trying to be fast, Marcus said. It comes from understanding. It's a result, not a method. He looked at Cass. 22. Yeah, you have time, Marcus said. Is it right? It was Lily who told him about the video. Came to the garage on the 9th day, walking without the limp now. The bruising on her jaw faded to yellow at the edges. She came in the side door the way someone comes in who's been here before many times. And she went straight to Marcus's bench with the purposeful stride of someone who has something specific to say. When she set her phone on the bench in front of him, the video had 11 million views. Just looked at the number for a long moment. It started going wide on day 3, Lily said. News picked it up by day 4. By day 6, it was international. She paused. I want to find you. I know, Marcus said. He'd seen the news van parked outside the gas station twice. He'd seen Phil shaking his head at them through the window both times. He's not telling them anything. My father's people aren't either, Lily said. It's going to get harder to hold the line. She studied him. You feel about that? Complicated, Marcus said. He set down the part he was working on and turned to face her properly. Me wants it to stay quiet, he said, because the moment it's loud, it becomes something other than what it was. What it was, that was just a person in trouble, and me being the one who happened to be there with the right knowledge. He paused. I want the story to turn into something that's about me, because it's not. What is it about? Lily asked. About the people who didn't move, Marcus said. The part that should make people uncomfortable. Going, in that part's straightforward. The hard question is why 400 other people stood there watching. Lily was quiet for a moment. That's a harder story to tell, she said. Stories are usually more important, Marcus said. She looked at him for a long moment. You should talk to someone, she said. A reporter, someone who can tell it the way you're describing it. Because right now, the version circulating out there is the hero version, and the hero version is missing everything that actually matters. Pick up his part again. Turn it over. I'll think about it, he said. You keep saying that, Lily said. I keep meaning it, Marcus said. He almost smiled. It was the same almost smile from the hospital. The one that stopped just short and became something more considered, more felt. She picked up her phone. She looked at the screen for a second, then turned it face down on the bench. Something I haven't told you, she said. Marcus looked up. Big line, she said. I knew something was wrong before you said anything. Just waited. I'd been feeling it since Tucson. I knew it wasn't right. I was going to have Rodriguez look at it after the opening ceremony. She paused. I was writing it anyway. Because I'm stubborn. And because I hate admitting that something's wrong before I've decided I'm ready to deal with it. She held his gaze. I could have parked that bike and walked the rest of the way. And I didn't. And because I was standing in the wrong place when that truck came down the ramp, said nothing. If I'd listened to what I already knew, She said, I wouldn't have needed saving. But you did need it, Marcus said. Yes, she said. You came. She paused. I'm not telling you this to feel guilty. I'm telling you because I think you should know that what you did wasn't just about courage. It's about paying attention when someone else stopped. What I was ignoring. You saw what I wasn't willing to see. She looked at him steadily, a different kind of skill than just being brave. Held her gaze. It's the same skill, he said quietly. It's in machines and people. The ones that are about to break always tell you first. You just had to be willing to listen. The garage was quiet around them. Had gone to lunch. Inez was on a test drive. Was out back on a parts run. Just Marcus and Lily and the smell of oil and the weight of what had been said. My father wants to have dinner, she said finally. You, if you're willing. Next Friday, she picked up her phone. Cooking, so the answer should probably be yes. Almost smiled. Almost. Tell her I'll buy there, he said. Lily nodded once. She moved toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped without turning around. She said, yeah, the people who didn't move, she said, thinking about what you said. You're right, is the harder question. A pause. But I think the answer to that question only matters because someone moved. Without you, there's no question to ask. There's just 400 people watching a girl burn. She left. Marcus stood at his bench for a long moment after the door closed. He picked up his part. He put it back down. He pressed both hands flat on the bench surface the way he had on the first night, feeling the solidity of it, the weight, the fact that it didn't move. He got back to work. Because some things you rebuild slowly, one honest hour at a time. And Marcus Hale had just started counting. Was on a Friday, and Marcus almost didn't go. Not because he'd changed his mind. Not because the garage had stopped feeling like the right place, or the room upstairs had stopped being the best sleep he'd had in years. Didn't go because Friday morning, he woke up and looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Really looked the way he'd been avoiding for 2 years, and what he saw stopped him cold. In the mirror was not the face it carried in his head when he thought about himself. The face in his head was the one from before, sharper, fuller, the face of a man who had somewhere to be and someone waiting on him. The face in the mirror was older by more than 2 years. The lines were deeper. The gray had taken over. The eyes looked like they'd seen things get put down and never picked back up. He stood at that mirror for a long time. Then he put on the cleanest shirt. He had a blue flannel, faded but whole, and he went downstairs. Cass was in the garage early, which wasn't unusual anymore. He started coming in 40 minutes before his shift started, setting up his station, going over his notes from the previous day. He had noticed it without commenting on it, the way a teacher notices a student who stays after class with quiet satisfaction without making it into something that would embarrass the kid. Cass looked up when Marcus came down. He looked at the shirt. He looked at Marcus's face. He put it together. Big night, he said. Marcus said. With Victor Carter, Cass said. No question word traveled fast in a shop. And Lily's visit 9 days ago hadn't gone unnoticed. Marcus said. Then, yes. Cass nodded seriously. You're nervous too. My cousin did some work for the Wolves 3 years back. Not the club, just the garage. And he said Victor Carter has this way of looking at you like he's reading a document. He does, Marcus confirmed. You got through it once already, Cass said. It's different, Marcus said. That was in the middle of a crisis. Gives you something to do with your hands. Dinner is just talking. Cass considered this with the seriousness of a 22-year-old who understood some problems are bigger than engines and treated them with equal respect. Marcus looked at him. He thought about the mirror, about the face in it, about the gap between who he'd been and who he was now, and whether that gap was something that showed in a room full of people who had known him for less than 2 weeks. That they'll see the before and the after, Marcus said, and decide the after isn't worth what they thought it was. This was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Bobby told me what you did for Inez with the Triumph. It's on day 3. It was just the tickler valve, Marcus said. Has been working on vintage British bikes for 12 years, Cass said. Missed a tickler valve issue. She knew everything about that carb except that. He paused. Bobby said she went home that night and told her husband she'd finally met someone who knew more than she did. When she sounded genuinely happy about it. Cass held Marcus's gaze. So whatever gap you're worried about, I don't think it's as wide as you think. He looked at him for a long moment. When did you get smart? He said. Cass almost grinned. I've been listening to you for 9 days. Contagious. Marcus picked up his jacket from the hook by the door. He went to dinner. The Carter house was on the far side of the north end. Not large. Not showy. The kind of house that says its owner has money, but doesn't need anyone to know it. Elena opened the door before Marcus knocked, which meant someone had been watching for him, which meant the dinner mattered to them in a way they hadn't made a performance of. That steadied him more than anything else could have. Elena said, "You came," with the warm certainty of someone who had genuinely wondered. She said I would, Marcus said. Lots of people say they will, she said, stepping back to let him in. The second one this month to actually show up. When he followed her inside. Victor was in the kitchen, which was the first surprise, because Marcus had constructed a mental image of Victor Carter as a man whose relationship to domesticity was purely theoretical. But sleeves rolled to the elbows, something to a cast iron pan that smelled extraordinary. He looked up when Marcus came in with the same measuring look and then said, 3 minutes early, Yanni. Walk fast, Marcus said. Good habit, Victor said. He gestured toward the table with the spatula. Sit. Elena made the tamales. I'm handling the rest, and if anyone tells you otherwise, they're lying. Lily was already at the table. She had a glass of water in front of her and was reading something on her phone that she put face down when Marcus sat across from her. The scrape on her jaw was gone now. She looked like herself, or at least like what Marcus was beginning to understand as herself, which was a version of her father's directness layered over something more searching and more patient. You look better, she said. Then what? Marcus said. Then the last time you walked through a door I was on the other side of, she said. Almost smiled. He was getting better. At almost smiling, it was practice, like any other skill that had gone unused. Bar, he said. Bars exist to be cleared, she said. Elena put food on the table, and the conversation broke open the way it does around a table, where people are genuinely hungry and genuinely comfortable, not all at once, formed, not organically, but organically, finding its own shape. Victor asked Marcus about the garage. Specific questions, not managerial questions, but technical ones. He noticed what needed attention, what he thought of the inventory system, answered honestly, including the part where he thought the intake process for customer bikes was disorganized in a way that was going to cost them a misplaced part sooner or later. Victor listened to that last part without expression. Then he said, Garrett said the same thing 6 months ago. Marcus said, you want to fix it? I want to think about how to fix it. Marcus said, then I want to talk to Inez because she's the one who runs intake in practice, even if she doesn't run it on paper. Without talking to the person who actually operates it is how you get a system that works on paper and fails in real life. Victor looked at him for a moment. Then he picked up his fork and resumed eating. Marcus understood that this was Victor's version of approval, not a compliment. Not an acknowledgement, just a man who has heard what he needed to hear and is now ready to move forward. Me about precision drive, Victor said. The championship years, Marcus talked. And it was strange, like finding a door in a wall you'd forgotten had a door in it, and opening it and finding everything on the other side exactly where you left it, just waiting. About the team, he talked to Peterson about the builds, about a season-ending race in Albuquerque where his engine had run 40 laps on a cooling system that should have failed after 20. The driver had won. Marcus had cried in the equipment bay afterward. Because the feeling of a machine, performing beyond what physics suggested it should be capable of, was one of the most profound things he'd ever experienced. He hadn't told that story to anyone in years. He hadn't realized until he told it that it still mattered that much. I was watching him when he finished, that full, unguarded look. You are, she said quietly. That story, the person we've been talking to. Marcus felt the weight of that land somewhere in the middle of his chest and stay there. And got lost for a while, he said. People get lost, Elena said from across the table. Factual, without drama or performance. The kind of statement that carries enormous weight precisely because it isn't trying to. Victor set down his fork. He looked at Marcus directly. To offer you something, he said, and I want you to hear all of it before you say anything. Just recognized the shift and register the same one from the festival, from the work truck, from the conversation that had led to the bench in the room. He set down his own fork and gave Victor his full attention. When not just the garage position, Victor said, the garage itself, ownership not yet, but management, full authority over operations, decisions, customer relations, process changes you need to do to make it run the way it should run. He paused. Inez and Bobby stay, they're good people, and they've earned their place. Person running the floor, setting the standard, deciding what kind of shop this is. I want that to be you. Marcus looked at him. Why? Marcus said. Because I've been watching the shop run without real leadership for 8 months. Victor said, since my last manager left, and it's been adequate. It keeps the lights on. It doesn't build anything. He held Marcus's gaze. You've been there 9 days. And Inez came to me yesterday and used the word finally. Absorb that. Finally what? He said. She didn't finish the sentence, Victor said. She didn't have to. Marcus was quiet for a long moment and looked at his hands on the table. Those hands that had spent 2 years being hidden, that had spent 9 days slowly remembering what they knew, that had flexed and reached and worked their way back towards something that felt like purpose. I told you, I wasn't ready, he said. You told me that 12 days ago, Victor said. Isn't a fixed point. It moves. And from where I'm sitting, you've been moving toward it steadily. Since the day you picked up that aluminum panel inside a burning truck. Lily said nothing. She didn't need to. She was watching Marcus with someone who has already seen where this is going and is simply waiting for the person in the middle of the story to catch up. Just looked at Victor. I have conditions, he said. Victor didn't blink. Tell me. Cass gets a formal apprenticeship, Marcus said. Training, structured, documented. That kid is going to be exceptional. And right now he's getting exceptional by accident. You want it to be on purpose. He paused. Intake process gets redesigned with Inez leading it, me supporting it. The shop doesn't operate on my word alone. It operates on the team's best collective judgment, with me as the tiebreaker. Another pause. And I need a raise in 3 months if the numbers justify it. When I'm not working for goodwill, I'm working for fair. Victor looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Elena, tempting. Something passed between them, the wordless communication of two people who have spent decades learning each other's language. And Elena's expression said something that her voice didn't need to. Victor turned back to Marcus. Done, he said. All of it. When he extended his hand across the table, Marcus shook it. And the deal was made the way real deals are made, not with documents and lawyers and formal language. Two people looking at each other and deciding that the other one can be trusted. And putting a hand to that decision and meaning it. View request came the following Monday. It came through Garrett, who presented it to Marcus at the bench with the same calm efficiency he brought to everything. Like a man who had long ago decided that all information is neutral and only the response to it matters. National outlet, Garrett said. They've been calling for a week. Victor's been holding them off. But they found Phil at the gas station, and Phil A. pause. Phil talked. Marcus looked up from what he was working on. Phil say, nothing harmful, Garrett said. One. He told them your name, confirmed you'd been living behind the station, said you'd been there 2 years. Also told them, Garrett checked his phone. Quote, he was always decent, just never took the time to see it. That's on me, not him. Quote. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Phil said that, he said. Verbatim, Garrett said. Marcus set down his tool. He thought about Phil's face. When he'd returned the coffee mug, he offered across the counter, 2 years, too late. The nod of a man doing private accounting. Tell the outlet I'll think about it. Marcus said. Garrett said, I know, Marcus said. I keep saying that. He is out there, Garrett said. It's going to get told with or without you. The question is whether you're in it. Marcus thought about what he'd said to Lily. One question is why 400 people stood there, and what she'd said back. Without you, there's no question to ask, Marcus said. But I pick the terms. I talk about what matters, not what makes a good headline. And if they try to make it only about the hero angle, I walk. Stood, Garrett said. He turned to go. Garrett, Marcus said. Turned back. How long have you been working for Victor? 19 years, Garrett said. Do you trust him? Considered that with the seriousness it deserved. Trust him to be exactly what he says he is, he said, which is more than I can say for most people I've worked for. It's enough, Marcus said. Garrett nodded and left, picked his tool back up. He looked what he was working on a throttle assembly on a custom build that Bobby started and handed off, the kind of delicate calibration work that requires patience and a steady hand and the ability to feel the difference between almost right and exactly right. He worked for 4 hours without stopping. The end of it. Asked everyone. He put the assembly back on the bike and mounted the grip. Used it once from the rider's position. Everyone felt the response clean. Then immediate and no hesitation. The cable moving exactly the way it should from exactly the first millimeter. Exactly right. He stood back. Bobby had come back in at some point during the 4 hours and was watching from his own bay. He's been fighting me for 3 days, he said. Cables stretch under tension over time, Marcus said. The play was in the cable, not the grip. Needed to be tensioned from the clamp end, not adjusted at the handlebar. And I adjusted it at the handlebar 3 times, Bobby said. Marcus said, I saw your notes. Bobby looked at the bike, then at Marcus, then back at the bike. You should have been doing this your whole life, Bobby said. Marcus said, I just stopped for a while. Bobby picked up his coffee mug, the same pot that had been within Marcus's reach every day since day 4, and held it out in a gesture that was less an offer and more a statement. Took it. Bobby didn't say anything else. He went back to his bay. It was how it was in the garage. Now, not loud, not dramatic, not the kind of camaraderie that announces itself. Quiet kind. The kind that builds between people who do good work side by side and trust each other with the parts that matter and don't need to make a speech about it. Because drank the coffee, he thought about the interview, what he would say and what he wouldn't, about the way stories get shaped by the people who tell them, and the responsibility that comes with being the only person in the room who knows what actually happened. He thought about Lily's voice in the dark of the wreckage. I'm getting you out, except that hadn't been her voice, it had been his. That had been the first thing he'd said in a burning truck to a woman he didn't know, and he hadn't thought about it before he said it. Come from some part of him that had never stopped. Being the man who moved toward the problem, even when the rest of him had forgotten. He set down the mug, he picked up the next part. Side. Somewhere on the highway, your motorcycle went past clean engine. Good timing. The sound of a machine running exactly the way it was supposed to run. It the way he heard everything mechanical, with the part of him that never went quiet, that cataloged and assessed and listened even when the rest of him was somewhere else entirely. Right now sounded right. Marcus Hale, who had been nobody for 2 years, who had been invisible for 2 years, pressed himself small enough that the world's eye slid right past him. Without snagging, felt something in his chest settle into a position it hadn't occupied in a very long time. Not happiness, not yet. Happiness was a further destination. Rejection. He had direction again. And for a man who had spent 2 years standing still, direction was everything. You ran on a Thursday, not a local outlet, national. The kind of publication that had a masthead people recognized and a readership that stretched from Maine to Hawaii. And the journalist who came was a woman named Sandra Reeves, who had been doing this for 22 years and had the quality that only the best journalists have, the ability to make you forget she was working, to make the conversation feel like 2 people talking rather than one person extracting information from another. He had agreed to 1 hour. He gave her 90 minutes because she pushed, but because she asked the right questions, the ones he told Garrett he wanted to answers, the ones that cut past the hero angle and into the harder territory underneath it. She walked me through the moment you decided to move. Marcus said, I didn't decide. I was already moving before the decision caught up. I looked at him. What does that mean? It means that for most of my life, moving toward a problem was automatic, he said. It's what you do when you're trained a certain way. When you've spent years in environments where hesitation costs you. When I lost that for a while, I stopped moving. I stopped believing the movement would change anything. He paused, standing on that curb, watching 400 people stand still. Something in me just refused to stand still with them. Do you think they didn't move? Sandra asked. He'd been waiting for that question. He'd been thinking about it since the day he'd said it to Lily. Since the day Lily had looked at him and said, that's the harder question. Because standing still feels safe, Marcus said, and moving toward danger feels crazy. That safety and rightness aren't always the same thing. And in that gap, in that space between what feels safe and what's right, that's where people get left behind. He held her gaze on both sides of that gap. I know what it looks like from the side where nobody moves. Spent 2 years there. Sandra wrote something in her notebook, talking about more than that day. She said, Marcus said, tell me about the 2 years. And he did. Not all of it. There are things that belong only to the person who lived them. And Marcus knew the difference between sharing what was useful and surrendering what was private. He told her enough about the work ending, about the grief, the way a person can slide sideways out of their own life so gradually that they're already gone before they realize they've left, about the gas station and Phil's coffee and the feel of cardboard under your back when you've been trained your whole life to fix things and can no longer find anything worth fixing. Listen without interrupting, which was its own kind of skill. When he finished, she said, what brought you back? Because thought about the brake squeal, about the specific sound of a mechanical system in distress that he heard through the noise of 100 or 400 motorcycles and a festival crowd, because some part of him never stopped listening, even when the rest of him had given up. Sound, he said. Sandra waited. A brake squeal, he said. Consistent front caliper, probably fluid loss. I heard it from 50 feet away, and I stood up. It. That was the whole thing. He paused. Years of being invisible, and a brake squeal made me stand up. I looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, that's the story. As Marcus said, that's the story. The piece ran 4 days later under the headline, The Man Who Heard What No One Else Was Listening For. Then the hero headline, not the mystery man angle, the real one. Because read it once, early in the morning, at the bench before anyone else came in. The way you read something that contains your own life written in someone else's words carefully, braced for the places where it doesn't quite land right, relieved at the places where it does. It landed right. Sandra had understood what he was trying to say and had found a way to say it that made it land for people who hadn't been there, hadn't heard the brake squeal, or felt the heat of the wreckage, or watched 400 people hold their phones up and not move. She'd made it real for them. She'd asked the hard question, why didn't they move? And she'd let Marcus's answer stand without softening it or editorializing around it. He set the phone down on the bench. Bobby came in first at his usual time. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the phone screen, face up on the bench with the article visible. Bobby said, just now, Marcus said. I was read it last night, Bobby said. She texted me at 11:30. Then she said he stopped. He seemed to be deciding whether to say it. Marcus said. She said, he's going to change this place, Bobby said. No context, just that. Marcus looked at his hands. You might be right, he said. Or she might be wrong. I'm going to try. Bobby nodded once. He went to his bay. He started his day. And that was that. The call started by 9 o'clock. Not press. Calls those Garrett handled before they reached Marcus. Different. They came to the garage's main line, which Cass was covering that morning, because Inez had a dentist appointment, and Cass came to Marcus's bench at 9:14 with an expression caught between bewilderment and something approaching awe. This guy on the phone, Cass said. He says his name is Earl Hutchins. He says he was at the festival. He says he was one of the people who didn't move. He wants to talk to you. Marcus looked at him. Put him through, Marcus said. Cass transferred the call to the bench phone. Marcus picked up. This is Marcus, he said. A pause. Then a man's voice, older, maybe late 60s, with the slight roughness of someone who'd spent decades outdoors or on job sites. Mr. Hale, my name is Earl. He stopped, started again. At the festival, I was maybe 30 feet from the truck when it came down. Marcus said. I had my phone out, Earl said. Filming. I filmed for, I don't know, maybe 90 seconds. Before I put it down, another pause, I put it down and I started moving toward it. And then his voice changed. And then someone else came out of the crowd and went in, and I thought, okay, someone's handling it. And I stopped. Marcus said nothing. That someone was you, Earl said. Stopped because you started. And I've been thinking about that for 3 weeks, and his voice broke, just slightly the way voices break in men who've learned to keep things controlled and haven't fully managed it this time. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I needed to say it to the person who did what I should have done. Marcus held the phone. He thought about what to say. He thought about what was true versus what would make the man on the other end feel better. And he chose truth because that's what the man was actually asking for, even if he didn't know it. He said, I'm not angry at you. I'm not angry at any of the people who stood there. It's real. Hesitation is real. The instinct to wait for someone else to lead is so deeply human that I'd argue it's almost involuntary. He paused. But I'll tell you this. The fact that you put the phone down and started moving, even after I'd already gone in, that matters. You didn't stay in the safe position. You chose to move, even when the risk was still there. You didn't do anything, Earl said. You were ready to, Marcus said. It's not nothing. That's actually the thing. Being ready to act is different from never considering it. You considered it, you moved toward it. That's the version of yourself you should be thinking about, not the 30 seconds before it, but the moment when you put the phone down. Silence on the line. Then I've been a volunteer firefighter for 30 years, Earl said. Gone into burning buildings. I don't know why. I hesitated. This was different, Marcus said. Your training kicks when you're in context, when you have your gear, your team, your role. Strip all of that away and put you in a crowd as a civilian, and your nervous system doesn't know which version of you to be. Not weakness, it's just how people work. Earl was quiet for a long moment. Forgiving man, he said. I'm a man who needed forgiveness himself for 2 years, Marcus said. It changes your perspective. The call ended shortly after. He sat at his bench for a moment with the phone still in his hand. Then he set it down because Earl's call was the first. Noon. There were 7 more. Not all of them were apologies. Some were people who had seen the article and had their own versions of a similar story, not festivals, not crashes, but moments where they had stood still when something in them had said move. And they'd chosen the safe position, and they'd carried that choice ever since. A woman who'd watched a car accident from her kitchen window and waited 10 minutes to call 911 because she'd been sure someone else already had, and who'd seen a kid being bullied on a subway platform and looked away and thought about it every day for 3 years. A retired nurse who'd been off duty at a restaurant when someone at another table had a medical emergency and she'd hesitated just 30 seconds, just enough time for doubt to take hold before she went over. She called because the article had named something they'd been carrying without a name for it. Marcus talked to every one of them, not because Garrett told him to, not because it was part of any arrangement with Victor or with the outlet, because they were calling the garage line, and Cass kept coming to the bench with the phone and a look that said, "Are you sure?" And Marcus kept saying yes to them, the way he talked about engines clearly, without judgment, finding the simple, honest truth inside the complicated feeling and saying it out loud. I observed this from his bay without commenting. Dosini. Inez, when she came back from her dentist appointment at noon and found Marcus on his fourth call of the day, sat down on a stool near his bench and just listened. When the call ended, she said, "You know you're doing something that has nothing to do with mechanics." Marcus said, "You're good at it," she said. "It's the same skill," Marcus said. "Listen to what the system is actually telling you, not what you think it should be telling you." The real problem, under the presenting problem. Be honest about what you find. He picked up apart from the bench. Machines and people. Same rules. Inez looked at him for a long moment with the expression she'd had when he'd told her about the tickler valve, that look of a skilled person recognizing a different kind of skill in someone else. She said, and went back to work. Came by the garage at 3 o'clock. He didn't announce himself, he never did. He didn't announce himself, he just appeared, walking on through the side door with the quiet authority of a man who belongs anywhere he decides to be. He found Marcus at the bench phone nearby, pages of notes. In Marcus's handwriting, names, what they'd said, everyone, what he'd said back, everyone, things he wanted to remember. Victor looked at the notes. He picked up the top page, set it down. "How many calls?" he said. 11, Marcus said. "My count. What are you doing with them?" "Talking," Marcus said, saying what seems true. Victor sat down on the stool Inez had vacated, the notes more carefully this time, taking his time. Turning the page, when he finished, he set it back on the bench and looked at Marcus. "You know what this is," Victor said. "It wasn't a question, what you think it is," Marcus said. "This is what happens when the right person gets visible at the right moment," Victor said. "People have been carrying this specific kind of weight, the weight of the moment they didn't act and they had nowhere to put it. You gave them somewhere." He paused. "That's not a small thing." "Mechanic," Marcus said. "You're a mechanic who survived something and came back from it," Victor said. "Now that means more to more people than any engine you could build." He held Marcus's gaze. "Stop building engines. I'm not saying stop building engines. I'm saying don't underestimate what it means to the person on the other end of that phone when the man from the article picks up." He looked at his notes. He thought about Earl, about the nurse, about the man on the subway platform who'd looked away and carried it for 3 years. "You know what to do with it," Marcus said. "Honestly." Beyond answering the phone, "For now," Victor said. "That's enough." As he stood, he around. He looked the garage, the bays, the bikes, in progress, maybe, working steadily in the far corner. Cass doing an inventory check with focused precision, living machinery, the whole living machinery of a workplace that was running better than it had 8 months ago. "Are up," Victor said. 14% in 3 weeks. "Work is good business," Marcus said. "Yes," Victor said. He moved toward the door. He stopped. He turned back. And what was on his face was something Marcus hadn't seen there before, something unguarded. The way Elena's face was always unguarded. The quality that must have been there, under the authority and the reputation all along. The thing that had made someone trust Victor Carter enough to give a young lost man a bench in a room 25 years ago. His name was Frank, Victor said. Marcus looked at him. "The man who gave me the room," Victor said. "Frank Carter. He told me one thing when I moved in upstairs. He said the only way back is through the work. Around it, not over it. Through it." He paused. "Said that to 2 people in my life. You're the second." Just held the weight of that. "What happened to the first one?" He said. "He runs his own shop in Flagstaff," Victor said. "Does good work. Family." A pause. "He comes back here once a year. His son, last time. Kid's 10. Already knows the difference between a Phillips and a flathead." He danced. Victor left. Marcus stood at the bench. He thought about a 10-year-old kid who already knew his screwdrivers because someone had passed something down, because someone had chosen to come back and bring the next person with them. He thought about Cass at 22, about the questions Cass asked and the speed at which he absorbed answers and the fire in him that was starting to have direction now, real direction, structured direction, the kind that doesn't burn out because it knows where it's going. He picked up his phone, not the bench phone, his cell, at it for a long moment. Then he opened the contacts and scrolled to a number he'd put in but never called. A Phoenix area code, a name he typed carefully, twice, making sure the letters were right, because the name mattered more than any other name in his life. When Hale, his son, 19 years old, living with Marcus's sister-in-law, on with the life that had to arrange itself around a father-shaped absence because Marcus had been too broken and too ashamed to be the father who came back. Stared at the name. His thumb hovered. He thought about what he'd said to Earl. Ready to act is different from never considering it. And he thought about the bench. The only way back is through the work. He thought about a 10-year-old kid who knew his screwdrivers, about what it would mean to have something to pass down, and to the person you most wanted to pass it to. Call. It rang twice. Then a voice, young, male, careful in the way of someone who doesn't recognize the number and has learned to be cautious. Hello. Marcus's throat tightened. Daniel, he said. It's your dad. Silence, not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. Silence of someone who has too much and is deciding where to start. Didn't feel it. He waited. He had spent 2 years standing still, and the waiting now felt different. Not passive, not defeated, but patient, purposeful. The kind of waiting that trusts the other person to find their way to the moment at their own pace. Daniel said finally. His voice was steadier than Marcus expected. I saw the article. Yeah, Marcus said. I saw the video too, Daniel said, 3 weeks ago. Before I knew it was you. I watched it and I thought, who does that? Who just walks into something like that? A pause. Then someone told me the guy's name. Marcus said nothing. Daniel said, simply, without embarrassment. Young people sometimes say the truest things without armor because they haven't yet learned to be ashamed of them. He cried for like an hour. And then I called Aunt Ruth and she said she'd been waiting for you to call and I should wait too. And his voice shifted. Waiting for 3 weeks, Dad. I know, Marcus said. Should have called sooner. I should have called a lot sooner than this, Daniel said. You should have. No softening of it. It's okay, or don't worry about it. The plain truth from a 19-year-old who had learned to carry the absence of his father with a certain pragmatic honesty that Marcus recognized because it was exactly the quality he'd spent 2 years trying to recover in himself. Marcus said again, I'm sorry, Daniel, for all of it. Once again, then are you okay now, for real? Looking on it, Marcus said, for real. Where are you? Valley. I'm running a garage. Running it? Managing it, Marcus said, toward something. Another pause. Listen, he could hear Daniel breathing, hear the sound of wherever Daniel was, some background noise. A TV maybe. Ordinary sounds of a life being lived. You want to come see it? Daniel said. Marcus closed his eyes. You want that too, he said. Next month, Daniel said. Break from school. Next month, Marcus said. Daniel said. And then after a beat, went voice that was trying to be steady and almost managing it. Okay, Dad. He thoned, thanking, and went still. They talked for 40 more minutes, not about everything. There were years between them that wouldn't be covered in one phone call, wounds that needed more than one conversation to close. He talked about Daniel's school, about his Daniel's school, about his interest in engineering, out about a motorcycle his friend had that he'd been trying to learn to work on and couldn't figure out. This made him describe the problem year, make, model, him the specific symptom, and talked him through the diagnostic process step by step, listening to Daniel's voice shift from uncertain to engaged to the particular tone of a young person who has just found out that a problem they thought was impossible is actually solvable. The best 40 minutes Marcus had spent in 2 years. When they hung up, Marcus sat at his bench and didn't move for a long moment. He said, from his bay, everything all right? Yeah, Marcus said. Everything's all right. He meant it. 3 months later, Cass got his formal apprenticeship papers, redesigned the intake process, and the shop hadn't lost a single part since. Bobby had started training one afternoon a week at the community college, teaching a basic motorcycle maintenance course that Marcus had suggested and Victor had funded, and Bobby had initially resisted and now couldn't stop talking about. The garage's numbers were up 26% from the month before Marcus had arrived. And on a Saturday morning in October, Daniel Hale, 19 years old, That's when 6 feet tall, his mother's eyes, and his father's hands walked through the side door of Red Valley Custom. And repair carrying a backpack and looking around at the bays and the bikes and the organized purposefulness of it all, with an expression that Marcus recognized immediately. Ignition. The same thing Marcus had felt on his first night there. Daniel found Marcus at the bench. They looked at each other. Between them, 2 years, 8 years. All the years of absence and silence and letters that were never sent was still there. When it didn't disappear because Daniel walked through a door. It don't work that way. They close slowly, the way a wound closes, with patience and repeated presence and the accumulation of small, honest moments. Daniel was here. He was standing in front of Mark, put out his hand, those mechanics' hands. Those hands that had once been hidden in pockets and were now clean and certain and working, and Daniel took it, pulled him in. The way young men do when they decide a handshake isn't enough, with one hand on Marcus's shoulder and a grip that held. He didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Cass looked over from his station and looked away with the discretion of a young man who was learning all kinds of things in that garage, not just the mechanical ones. For a moment, Marcus put his hand on his son's shoulder. Let me show you how it works. Daniel looked around the garage. He looked at his father. Yeah, he said, I want to see everything. Marcus Hale, the man nobody saw, ignored, the man who had been sleeping on cardboard behind a gas station when a brake squeal pulled him back into the world, began to show his son the thing he loved most. In the place where he'd come back to life every morning, when the work was good and the people around him were real and the gap between who he'd been and who he was had finally fully closed. This was the truth that Red Valley learned that summer, the truth that spread further than the video, further than the article. Than 11 million views and 100 phone calls to a garage bench. A person's worth is not determined by what they've lost, determined by what they choose to do with what remains. Hale, with his mechanic's hands and his listening ears and his hard-won understanding of what it costs to stand still and what it takes to finally move, had proven it. Every single day, that is who he was. That is who he chose to be. And that choice made in a moment no one expected, by a man no one saw coming, changed everything it touched, and kept on changing it. The fires went out, and the crowd went home, and the highway outside Red Valley went quiet again under the wide, indifferent Arizona sky.